Abe, do you remember who went first last time? Because for the life of me, I can't remember. Oh, hey everyone. I'm Dustin Bass with the Sons of History. Now, every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central Time, I do a show on Instagram Live. Now, I'd love it if you'd join me on Instagram on Thursday nights, but until then, you can watch all of the previously recorded episodes here on YouTube. So, while you're enjoying this conversation, I'm going to be enjoying a little game of chess with my good friend Thomas Jefferson. And don't worry, Abraham Lincoln is here just to keep us honest. Anyways, I hope you enjoy the show. All right, how's it going, everyone? I am having a very special guest on tonight, Pastor Wendell Hutchins. He's going to be joining us. He's sending him an invite. There he is. It's going to be a really good conversation. I truly believe. Pastor Hutchins, how are you?
Fine. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. It's really good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
You look healthy.
I put on some pounds.
Yeah? Well,
3 pounds. I've gained 3 pounds during this COVID-19 pandemic.
So, I mean, to an extent, like there's no way to stay healthy during this pandemic. Either you catch the pandemic or you're sidestepping type 2 diabetes.
That's right. That's right.
So, well, thank you very much for joining me, Pastor Hutchins. And I think this is going to be a very good conversation. I think it's going to be a pretty intense conversation. But at the same time, I think you know as well as anyone that this is a conversation that needs to be had.
Sure.
Because these are some really troubling times. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the church world here in the U.S., but also, you know, around the world, but primarily here in the U.S. And I want to just throw some things at you real quick. So there's been an ongoing, and I think you're a man of history as well. And over the past, I would say, things really went into sort of not hyperspeed, but things started to really pick up against the church come 1960s, late 50s, 1960s into the 70s. And there's been the onslaught. We know the primary things of removing God from school, prayer out of school, Bible out of school, real push against, you know, remove everything out of the government that pertains to God, like the 10 Commandments, different things like that. Sort of the basis of what it is that America is based on, as well as let's go after the founding fathers. They weren't Christians. They didn't believe in God. They were, you know, there's just been an ongoing thing. And now come 2020 with this pandemic, it seems like things have been really put into hyper mode.
Right.
And when March hit, end of March, I'm going to give you just a week span on sort of what took place. Gatherings of 250 or more were discouraged and then banned outright by numerous states. That number, and this is all within a week span, number dropped to 50, and then it dropped to 10.
Right.
And then Gavin Newsom, the governor over in California, was the first to actually ban all gatherings. That was the largest state in the union. And then 11 other states followed quickly thereafter. And then there were more states to follow. And there are still states that are doing bans of gatherings of even small groups. California just recently put in their stay-at-home order again. So there's been a push of churches being non-essential. And the First Amendment of freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and also, you know, freedom to assemble peaceably together has been outright removed. Where do you think that a lot of this is coming from?
Well, I think it would be wise if and I know you certainly are a student and a philosopher of history, so you do this probably better than anybody, but I think too many people are trying to tune in and look at one part of the mosaic rather than taking a global view of what's what's going on, what's been happening from a historical perspective, and then being able to properly predict what the end game is. So when it comes to the specificity of what's happening with the church, I think it's wise for us to back up and take a global view of, as you said, of what's been happening since the 40s, 50s, and 60s. What we see now is a full maturity in a generation that was was completely inoculated from history, but they've been birthed in this theoretical utopia of secularism, and the promise that socialism will right every wrong and bring equilibrium to the masses at the expense of those who are champions of liberty. So their edict is to rearrange and rewrite history for us by absolutely diminishing reality. Where the church is involved, we are the bastion, or we should have been the bastion of free speech, and we are to be the voice of the conscience of this nation. For the agenda of the enemy to be fully matured and to work without hindrance, it had to minimalize the church and then eliminate the church. We've seen that. We've seen that throughout history, where, as you stated, and if you take a reconnoitering position of just reflecting back to the 60s, taking God out of the public square, taking school prayer out of school, et cetera, we have marginalized the voice of Christianity. And where you marginalize the voice of the pulpit of Christianity, you diminish the import and the potency of truth. Thus, you change conscience. Now we have a fully matured giant that is this thought police that is shaming people and coercing them into behaving as sheep because there's no pulpit alive that is preaching with the fire and the conviction of a historical truth and a perception. So I think where we are today is we've seen our First Amendment rights challenged. We've seen the right to peaceably assemble challenged. We have seen the church being told that they're marginalized and non-essential. And I think that these are wild accusations. These are wild trumpets. These are statements that are being made. And the gentlemen and the people that are making them have been absolutely appalled in hilarity. They've been appalled at the lack of response. And so they've taken and absolutely poured gas on the fire because they can't believe they've had such a slow or minimal response from the church. And we traded liberty for safety. Yeah. And at the pastors and preachers and ministers are so careful, and we always want to take care of the flock, and we want to be so careful to protect our parishioners, and we want to do everything that we can to honor government and be a part of the solution rather than the problem. And I think we are careful to do that, but we did not discern that all of this was being played like a symphony from a diabolical chamber that wants to rewrite history and change America. So I think the church is just a part of that. I think the church is a major actor in the play that they plan to eliminate as swiftly as possible. And they're going to do it in hopes of silencing that voice, silencing that conviction, silencing that conscience.
So something an analogy that I've used before is the famous analogy of how do you boil a frog?
Right.
You put it in cold water and then you slowly heat up the water.
Yeah.
And I think that is, and I've also I've mentioned like to friends like the only way that you could take down America. One, America was based on the fact that John Adams said it, George Washington said it, our founding fathers said it, like, this Constitution, this republic will not last if the people are not moral. and their morality is based in their religion.
That's right.
And so with places like China and Russia and places where there's been major revolutions, Cuba, Nicaragua, those places did not have the foundation that we have.
That's right.
And I've said those places like that came in and you had these, 5-year plans that were instituted, like that would never fly here in the US. Like, because
right.
the people would rise up and say, no, you don't know what you're doing. You're out of office.
That's right.
I've said that there has been 100 to 125, even 150-year plan that has been in place over that span of time to slowly but surely kill off what you would call, modern Babylon or modern Rome, however you want to call America.
Right.
And you see that is, everybody has been sort of lulled to sleep, but also not just lulled to sleep to where they don't think that things are happening, but convinced. And one of the major convincing ideas that is deceptive is the idea of separation of church and state and the misconstruence of that statement. Right. That is nowhere in any of our founding documents. It is, as you know, it's in a letter from Thomas Jefferson to some Baptist ministers assuring them that we are not going to have a state church.
Right, right.
And so for the past 100 years, for certain, there's been the separation of church and state. There has to be separation of church and state. The church does not belong in the government. And for some reason, the church has slowly but surely believed that. And now that a lot of this is coming to fruition, I almost see it as, if it's you, I would think that you're sitting back and you're seeing what's happening right now. And it's almost like, of course, this is inevitable. This was inevitably going to happen. And maybe, and tell me what you think, maybe now it's like, maybe people are going to wake up. Pastors and organizations may wake up.
Yes, I've seen this coming, and I've been, at times I felt like I'm a silent voice screaming from a burning housetop. But, we know that that's not the case. There are many, many thousands of people that have been championing what's coming, what's happening. I don't think America ever believed it would happen in our lifetime. We always believed that we believed in the solidarity of our faith and the good fortune of our country and our nation, and we've smiled at ease, and we've been at ease in Zion, so to speak. So I think the rapidity of all of this, the speed at which it's happening, it speaks to one thing. There are forces at work that you talked about, a cabal of men who control vast populations of people. And America is the linchpin that must fall for their world domination, their plan to come together. And so much of our freedom and our liberty, the right to freely exercise religion, the right to peaceably gather together, the right to assemble and worship, is outside of the concord of and the scope of what their plans are, because they're the Antichrist. They're driven by a demon spirit. So they are antithetical to everything Christ is. Their plans are antithetical. Everything they do is so. I think what we've done is we've set back. I say we, I'm talking about the church world, has set back, and we believe that being nice and being godly would somehow convince people to come to the other side. And so the way I tell it is that we've been sitting at a banqueting table trying to logically approach and reason with people to show them that there is righteousness and there is good and there is right standing and there is virtue in America. And these people have never wanted to have a reasonable conversation. They have been enemies of truth. And so to be an enemy of truth, there's only one way to combat a real truth, and that is to distort that truth. And they have assimilated an army of people who have been working to excise truth from the ledgers of life until they rewrite their own story. And that's exactly what they've done. They've said something so long that an entire generation has believed it. And that's where we are.
Do you, your viewpoint on how much of that mentality has snuck into the church first, and second, how much of that mentality that has snuck into the church has also crept into the ministry of not understanding that a majority of what we're up against, or what the church is up against, is actually a spiritual battle? I hope that question makes sense.
It does. It does. It's a very provocative question. It's very deep. So it has multiple layers to it. But to answer that question, I think you first have to delve into the psychology, the morphing of the psychology of a free, a libertarian. Jesus said, I've come to set you free. Whom the Spirit has set free, he's free indeed. So we have this birthright of freedom in the Christian church if we're followers of Jesus Christ, but we don't live in that freedom because our minds have never been converted. So what you have in the pulpit today is you have philosophers and pseudo preachers that are puppeting and echoing and parroting messages that they've heard, but they're filtering that message through the ethos of their own worldview, which is now skewed. For example, if you preach to me about liberty, but you in fact have never really known liberty, you've only known that you were not on a large plantation with fencing, but you're really never free because you still have a ball and chain around your ankle. Are you free?
Right.
Or do you just perceive that you're free? And that's where we have a generation of people today they're talking about things in Christianese that sound wonderful. They sell books, they sell tapes, and they're all about helping you feel better about your condition, but they never change your condition. So I think what's happened is we've raised and matured a group of people that have been preaching from the plantation that they're free, and they've been convincing one another they're free, but in reality, their mind is controlled by a messaging system that they did not perceive as an enemy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes absolutely sense, and I was absolute sense, and I was going to build off of that because you made the mention of people have replaced freedom with security. And there is a whole lot of this mentality going on because people don't understand what freedom is. And if you don't understand what freedom is, then you won't notice the ball and chain. You won't even notice it.
That's right.
And to your point, there are a lot of people who are speaking about we all need to be free, but with a misunderstanding of what freedom is. They misunderstand what freedom is with perfection. They want everything to be perfect for everyone. It's like that's not freedom. You have to have freedom for one to succeed, and then also you have to have freedom to fail. And if you don't have the freedom to fail and lose, then you actually are not free. You don't have control over your own being.
That's right.
And that I see, and I know you see it. I see it all the time on social media from fellow Christians who are speaking things that are we'll just call it, as Paul called it, doctrine of devils, where you are saying one thing, and maybe even in your heart you think that you're speaking the right thing, but when you dig into it, you are actually speaking and claiming the very opposite. You're actually requesting slavery.
Oh, you're endorsing it.
Yeah.
You're endorsing your own freedom, your own slavery. You're exactly right. I think what's happened today is we have this, there's so much to this, and I love talking about it, but you're wanting to awaken a congregation of freedom fighters, and you're you're absolutely shocked and dismayed that when the clarion call comes to rise up and to pray and to war in the spirit, if you will, for a lack of a better analogy, to put on the whole armor, to get ready to battle, that you're not confronted with an army that's rising to their feet. You're looking at hallowed and empty buildings that were once populated with people who call themselves praisers. So why did that happen? Because you no longer have freedom fighters.
Yeah. And I think that goes all the way back to the miseducation, the misinformation.
That's right. That's right.
We have
philosophers. We have philosophers who talk about subjects. You know what I mean?
You've got philosophy, and you've got the philosophers in the church too. And
that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, because so it's not just educational understanding freedom of what freedom is, but also a misunderstanding of what spiritual freedom is. And now those two things have come together to create the situation that we're in right now, to where our physical, actual constitutional freedoms are being removed, while at the same time as that happening, our spiritual freedoms are being removed. And on both playing fields, on both instances, people don't see it. They don't see it that way.
No, they don't get it because they have lived in such a compartmentalized world. They want to talk about the topic or the issue that's important to them and deal with that, and they think by addressing it, it's as if I post something on social media and it satisfies my quest to be heard on the subject. Yeah. And that's enough. Well, that didn't do anything. That didn't change anything. So we've had people talking about in the church, we've had people talking about, we believe in liberty. We believe in this, but we go vote for our slavery. We vote for the demagoguery that's going to become the slave owners of our liberty, the people who are going to mistreat us and to malign us and to hurt us. And we endorse them. And we've done this for years, and that's why we're here. So you don't have freedom fighters anymore. So what's happened is, when you've never been in a scuffle and you've never had to buy freedom with your blood, it's easy to trade and barter freedom for safety. Yeah. If you think you're going to be hurt. So they fly this thing through the earth, and they strike us with this pandemic, and it's a very much a pandemic. If you don't believe me, ask Bill Gates.
Well, yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, he's been prophesying it for God knows how long, and he's prophesied a second one.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've traded your liberty for their safety. Once you trade their safety and you receive their safety, then they want you to wear the badge and the measurement of their safety to prove your loyalty to their demagoguery, and they want you to wear their uniform. Once you wear their uniform, then they're running a test on how easily it is to convert you, to move you into this place. So we've been in this place of 15 weeks of isolation, 14 weeks of isolation. And we moved in there with a fear of an assassin we could not see. We've given ourselves to safety. We're walking and we're working and we're hoping that we never catch anything. We've been constrained by fear, but they knew that the church would be compliant, or they thought we would be compliant, but they never dreamed we would be compliant thus far. Yeah. So for this span of time, COVID-19 is no longer the enemy of the church. The enemy of the church now is comfort and complacency.
Yeah.
And when we choose comfort and complacency over the call of God on our life, well, what we're doing is we're surrendering. And where you won't fight in the spirit, you're never going to fight for your personal freedom. Yeah. Right?
Right.
You're going to take up a Bible verse and twist it out of context and use it as a flag to fly mediocrity. Yeah. And say, oh, the Lord wants me to turn the other cheek. No, he would like for you to get up and kick some tail.
Okay. I want to move on to the next question, but I want to add on two things real quick. One, I think people have replaced their Bible with the devotional, with the daily devotional.
There you go.
And two, I keep seeing it over and over and over from good Christian people that I know personally who, well, I say good Christian people, but they're good people who mean well, but it's just they completely misunderstand Jesus Christ.
Yes.
They put him as what you said earlier. They just, people are mistaking it all for, they just want you to be nice and kind and sweethearted and all that. And then they equate, and that's how Jesus was. And I'm like, then you haven't been reading any of the Bible, and you didn't read definitely any of the Old Testament, definitely anything, doing with Jesus during in the Gospels.
That's right.
He was led as a lamb to the slaughter.
Right.
He kept his mouth closed for the specific purpose to save mankind, and then eventually do what he is planning to do in the book of Revelation, which is the furthest thing from kindness.
That's right.
So I want to
yeah,
put it right there. I mean, you can add something if you want to, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Well, I think you're a provocateur of thought, but this odious father of lies that we're struggling to understand and acquiescing to, we're capitulating on a battlefield that is ancient. This is not a new thing. This is not a new phenomenon. This is not just happening to us, and we've never been confronted with it. Just as late as 2009, the church had a totally different response. We had an epidemic then. You can Google CBS News. They've written articles about it. You can talk to the CDC. They documented it. But in 2009, we had over 80 million people that were infected with a virus. Right. We didn't shut down the economy. We didn't lose our minds. We didn't shelter in place. We didn't do any of that. Why? Because we had a different mentality about things and about life, and we were not so easily easily entrenched in our safety. We were not so easily swayed into giving up liberty. So it's a different day. So that's 2009. But why don't you race back to 1000 BC? Why don't you look at the Egyptians? Pick out the Roman Empire, 25 emperors. I preached about this a couple of weeks ago about the cancel culture, what we're seeing. 25 emperors had their names eviscerated and obliterated from the history books because they fell out of repute with the Roman Senate, and their names and their memories are erased. So cancel. And there's an old Persian law that Jesus borrowed. When he touched it, he was resurrecting that old Persian law that the Romans were employing, and it was called damnatio memoriae, and it was the erasing of the memory of any man or woman who was noble that fell out of good grace or did not walk in step with culture. So this spirit has been going on forever, and the Bible in the book of Revelations prophesies that it's going to happen in the end of time. The same thing. And Jesus picks up this negative. It's a litome. He picks up this negative and he says, I am going to say, damnatio memoriae, in effect. I'm going to say, I never knew you. How can the Savior of the world, the Redeemer of our life, look at us and say, I never knew you? Because you did not behave like me in the battle. And that's what we're getting to, is we're seeing a separation in the church world between the wheat and the chaff. Between light and darkness, between the professors and the confessors.
Come on now. You got it.
That's what.
So
that's where we're at.
Let's move back to March of this year.
Okay.
What I had mentioned at the very beginning, all of this stuff starts happening, and all of a sudden they shut down the church.
Yes.
So you can't have church.
Yeah.
You can rely on social media. But you shut down the doors, and some really insane stuff. And I don't know if you read the article that I wrote not too long ago for the Epic Times about And I was very harsh about the pastors in
You
this
were.
nation and the organizations, the Christian organizations. I didn't hold anything back because I was just, one, I was very upset, and two, I was distraught because I'm seeing not today or tomorrow. I am seeing 6 months, 4 years from now. I'm, because this is a precedent that a most dangerous precedent that was set. But let's go back to March. What should have been the church's response?
We should have risen up in such a velocity of resistance. And when I say that, I'm careful to say that in a spiritual way. I don't want to sound like I'm advocating physical revolution, but I'm talking about a spiritual. We should have taken such a strong stand with our voices, with our convictions, with the need to let the authorities know we are absolutely essential. And in fact, we're the only cure in this world for this pandemic. We can cure this. But we didn't do that. We retreated and sat on the second row, and we allowed science to become the tip of the spear rather than our prayer and our faith. The Bible didn't say when your science is correct, I'll heal your land. He said, when you humble yourselves and pray, I'll heal your land. So we should have had our voices. And I know many, many of our great leaders, they're peers of mine, and I'm in fellowship with them. And I know that they were working very hard behind the scenes. The president was very open to our ecclesiastical bodies that were pressing him, and he had them meeting with him, and we were all talking to him. So I know that there were great opportunities and avenues open to us to the White House. But Congress wanted nothing to do with a spiritual importe from the church world. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The pushback was in Congress, not anywhere else. So that's where we need to clean house, and that's where we need to stand up and lift our voice. And we know there's not a man that I'm consulting with and talking to, and I'm over a lot of churches, but every pastor I talk to knows that it's going to cost them, and it may cost them greatly, but we look at where we are today, and we're no different than many of our elders and the people that we follow. They paid a great price for their liberty, and we're going to pay a great price to continue to keep liberty.
Yeah. And referencing one of the things that you said, America sort of being this last bastion of liberty. And I truly believe that. Walter Williams wrote that probably a little while ago, but he wrote that. He's like, if America falls, the whole world falls.
That's right.
It's the domino effect. Like,
right.
America is the last bastion of liberty. And a lot of people will be like, no, I mean, you've got the UK, you've got Canada and Australia and, places like that. And I encourage people to go and look at some of the laws that they've passed, not just religious laws, but just personal liberty laws. Like, you think it's bad here, especially from a libertarian or even a conservative perspective. You think it's bad here. It's really bad over in the UK and over in Australia and Canada. They've made some insane laws. And so if it's bad there where it's considered Western democracy, just imagine where it is in a lot of these other places in Europe. But going back to the last bastion of liberty being America, I think a lot of people had this idea that persecution happens everywhere around us, but not here, despite the fact that we see cases, constantly, year after year after year, of religious persecution.
Right.
We say it can't happen here. How much do you think naivete played a role in not just the church, but the leaders of the church?
Oh, I think. I mean, it's scary to think about it, but I would say at least it's well over 90%. There's just an absolute, when you consider a large population, a large group, a large ethnicity of worshipers, they're not only naive, they're completely blinded to the reality that their votes are enforcing their destruction.
Correct.
So this is the reality that we're in, and what we're working with. And there's not a good Christian that I know. I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican. There's not one person I know that does not believe that they're sincere and that does not believe they're sincerely right.
Yeah.
But they have two different worldviews of America, and they're voting their conscience and their steps, and they're ordering their steps after that worldview. And that worldview permits them to believe that they can pass this and look away from this and have this and don't pay attention to that, and everything will be fine. And that is not the, we can have our worldview, but we have absolute truth. And anything that does not measure and line up with absolute truth is going to fail, because it's going to meet the judgment of that absolute truth. Yeah. And that's where we are. This is the culmination of the end of history as we know it. And this is the unfolding. This is the unfurling. You have Ephesus, one of the 7 churches in Revelation. It was the loveless church. You have Smyrna. It was the persecuted church. They were 40 miles away from each other. Both of them were living in very wealthy neighborhoods, very rich societies, enjoying the best of the Roman Empire. And yet one is so lavished in splendor and in ease that they are not loving their brothers. And they're condemned by Jesus himself for not loving their brothers, while their own brethren 40 miles away are perishing by the sword and at the stake. Two different worlds, two different worldviews. But yeah. Jesus says there's only one of you that I'm going to come in. And that is you who are holding the faith, and you who are pure to your life, and your virtue is intact, even though you're persecuted and you're suffering abject poverty. To you who cannot love your brother, because if you don't love your brother, you don't love me, I condemn you. So this is the world. I mean, we're living in the ethos of all of this right now. And we haven't loved our brothers enough to scream that the stairwell is on fire and hell is at the door. You know what I mean? We've talked about how to have happy homes, happy marriages, happy sex, happy golf, happy, you know what I mean? It's everything is happy, happy, happy.
Good luck with the golf one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just how to make you feel better and do better. And there's a place for that. Yeah. But we lost consecration. We lost talking about the consequences of sin. We talked about losing the moorings of absolute truth. And here we are.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a down.
No. Look, you're not going to have me disagreeing with you, because you're speaking exactly the way I view it. There is no possible way that God could not judge a nation according to his laws and us continue to break his laws and expect no judgment to come. No. And that's been a mentality here. Is not only is it can't happen here from the perspective of we'll never lose our religious liberties and we'll never lose all of this, but God would not judge this nation harshly.
Well, and you're the professor of history, and so you know this much better than all of us. But I'm going to tell you, if you look at the founding of this great experiment called the Republic, we are unique because we're the only nation on earth that's ever been birthed out of the Judeo-Christian tenets of the Word of God.
Right.
We have drawn from the very words of God. We've drawn the structure and the platform and the apprenticeships of liberty. We've drawn all of that from the words of God. We're the only nation to have ever done that. But the Bible also says, to whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
So if we've known an era of liberty that no other feudal system that ever gave birth to a nation has ever known, if we've known a liberty and a purity and an ease that they have not known, we're going to be judged, I think, for how we stewarded that liberty.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that or not?
No, I do. I mean, and it goes back to the, much is given, much is required. Like,
Yeah.
The whole the birthing of this republic, the birthing of America, just this goes right in line with the Bible. And I don't want to get all into that because that's another conversation altogether, which would be very offensive to some people.
Yeah.
But I think that those slats, I believe that's how George Washington labeled it, the slats that hold up the foundation of that,
Yes.
hold up the structure.
Yes.
You slowly but surely remove those slats and then the structure falls. Abraham Lincoln, guy right here, Abraham Lincoln said the same thing. He's like, the only way that this country is going to fall apart is if it is done from within. And
that's right.
That's exactly exactly what's been going on.
That's right.
And I think it's the foundation, however, of this country that will save us. Now, I know I'm not a super optimist. I don't really like being an optimist. I prefer being the other way because G.K. Chesterton said, that's the easy way to think. Being a pessimist is the easy way to think. So, but I think the foundation is what is going to end up saving us because there are so many people in this country that love America, not for what it is right now, but for what it was built upon. And I think that is going to be our saving grace because I do believe that there's going to be a pushback to those founding principles.
My prayer and my faith and my blood and my life is given to that hope, and I'm working every day to that end with great faith. I'm a born optimist. I want to believe in that, but I do know that if we don't rise now,
yeah,
if we keep putting it off till tomorrow, we're going to lose it because the foundations are being attacked, and they're trying to remove those foundations, and they're excising them with and excoriating from the history books all of the tenets of our faith and all of the memories of our foundation. And once you lose your history, I can change your future.
Correct. Yeah. I did a little talk the other night on my personal Communist Manifesto. And one of the things that Karl Marx says is that in a communist society, the present dominates the past.
That's right. That's right.
And that's exactly what we've run into. Next question.
Okay.
Social media has become the blessing of the church movement as of late.
Mm-hmm.
What are the potential fallouts of relying too much on social media to deliver the gospel?
Well, we're already seeing that because the gospel, social media should be an instrument and a vehicle we use as a conduit to accent the work of the Spirit. In other words, Paul used letters. We can use technology the same way. But once you separate technology and you separate social media from the interaction and the interplay of human spirits touching human spirits and God, when you take out that rubbing shoulders, that iron sharpening iron, that face-to-face accountability, when you take out social relationship and all you have is social media, then you have a cataclysmic implosion between cultural comfort, cultural ethos, cultural mindsets, the structure of thinking. You have an implosion of all of those forces in a believer's life who is living a life of isolation and loneliness. We have the most connected society in the world, and yet we have the more lonely people. That's why we have the highest percentage and number of people that are on narcotics and pharmaceuticals, because we're having to drug our national mind to go to sleep because of the loneliness, the pain, and the anxiety that we're facing.
I mean, suicide is one of the top killers in the U.S.
It's astronomical how much suicide has risen just in the last 4 weeks. So heart attacks are up over 800%.
Right.
since March. So we have an incredible problem. And yeah, the gospel is meant face to face. Go tell, right? And so we're using social media. I'm doing it myself. We're having to do that to try to reach people and stay connected to people. But that's a medium that is only there to help us. It can never become the substitute for relationship. We've got to have relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the worries that I've had is, one, I think it is extremely obvious who is running the social media platforms. We're on Instagram, that's owned by Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Does not like Christianity. Twitter, Dorsey, he does not like Christianity. You took the heads of YouTube, i.e. Google, they are against, all of it, more or less. And you see continuously, these are against our guidelines. This is restricted. This can't be said. That can't be done.
Right.
And one of my primary worries is that we will get so comfortable. The church will get so comfortable with, we can really push the gospel via these video platforms. You just stay at home and worship with us as we play. And all of a sudden, YouTube is like, no, that's over. Facebook is like, nah, we're going to be doing away with that. You're not going to use our platform, because President Trump recently, he's really pushing that, hey, they're acting like a publisher. They're not a public forum. So done with that. They can easily just say, this is against our guidelines. We don't want to do this anymore. You're done.
That's right. And it can happen with the flip of a switch or the rewriting of the code. And, that's one of the big things I've talked about to leaders is we're living. So they've shuttered the doors of the church. They've hollowed your building. They've made your pews empty. They confined you to your homes, and we're going to be happy as long as we have a social media platform to reach them, that they then are going to turn off. And now we're left with no communication, no trafficking of the gospel. So this is not something that we should be accepting. It's something that we're doing temporarily, but we better be on fire to get back in those buildings. Personally, I started months ago coming back. And I have to tell you that I'm heartbroken at how many of the believers are not feeling that unction and that urgency to gather together. And it's all because of fear. So we're staying plugged in with them socially on social media just to be connected to them. But that cannot replace the laying on of hands, the talking with one another, the communication. Life is moved at the speed of relationship. Blessing comes at the speed of relationship.
Yeah. So I want to ask your thoughts on religious persecution. A lot of people, obviously, a lot of times people don't really understand that, it is Christians around the world that get persecuted more than any other religion.
Yes.
I think last time I looked, it was around 85% of the religious persecution were Christians on the global scale. You're seeing a lot of stuff advancing in China, and that's been an ongoing thing. Obviously, I mean, it's been this, over the past 100 years. We understand, like, Mao, and we understand Stalin and people like that who just said, we're not doing any type of religion or morality. And I really wish people understood that there are people who are just against Christianity as a whole.
Yes.
It's not about your interaction with other Christians and stuff. It is, there are people who are in power.
Yeah.
And you look at, Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea. His parents were ministers, and he understood we cannot have Christianity in this nation because it will change the direction of where I want us to go with the communist, with communism. And so you have stuff like that where you have this ongoing push against Christianity. China is a prime example. In
Did you see?
2007,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you see the July 19th article out of China?
is this the about the social welfare programs and stuff?
No,
And
this is
replacing the symbolism with Mao.
well, China ordered all Christians to renounce their faith in Jesus Christ and worship President Xi.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're wanting to replace all of the Christian symbols.
Yes.
And replace it with pictures of Mao and
Mm-hmm.
President Xi.
Mm-hmm.
I believe President Xi as well. Or they'll get their social welfare removed.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And then you'll starve.
Yeah. So that's a modern day Church of Smyrna.
Yeah.
That's exactly what was happening, because they were told the same thing in Smyrna. You either worship the goddess Sybil and the emperor out of Rome, or you'll die in abject poverty.
Right.
If you do not die by the sword.
And I know that there's been a recent agreement within the Catholic Church and China.
Yes.
To have communist leaders be the heads of these churches. And so there's an agreement. That's what you would call, like you said, Smyrna on one end, Ephesus on the other, where they're fine with what's going on as long as they're safe.
That's right.
And then you've got Europe, and I've continued to make direct comparisons, especially between two revolutions, or two wars, if you will, the French Revolution and the Spanish Civil War.
Yes,
so
sir.
One at the turn of the 19th century, and then right in the middle or earlier into the 20th century, where you're having a lot of what's happened then happening now. You've got the burning of churches, you've got the attacking of priests and ministers. Now that's happening in Europe, but now it's happening here. I've been sent a number of videos of churches being set on fire, parishes being set on fire, priests being attacked, ministers being attacked. And then you have, stuff that's happening here where you've got even the law coming in and arresting pastors and fining people who are going to church. Last question, well, two-tiered question, because we've got just about 5-6 minutes left. Your thoughts on religious persecution around the world, but primarily here in the U.S., and is persecution good for the church? Because we've seen how the church has grown exponentially in China over the past 40 years. And as well as I'm hearing there's a big boom in Christianity in Iran.
Yes.
But those two, your thoughts on religious persecution here in the U.S., and is it good for the church?
Okay. Persecution in the U.S. is real, and it's growing exponentially. The blunt force trauma of that persecution will be realized if certain people have their way, and we have new leadership in November. You will see a cataclysmic assault launched against Christianity, and they've already forecasted that. They're showing us what life will look like January 2020 or 2021 if we do not have a reverence for and a memory and a love for the Church of God. So I think that's a very real thing, and that's certainly something that we have to recognize, that it is absolutely on the march. And there's been a lot of persecution that has been flamboyant, been very well documented, and easily seen in the newscast, where you have pastors arrested, things that you would never expect to see in America. You now see them, if not daily, on a weekly basis, and we're dealing with that all across the country. So I applaud all of our lawyers that are working to save churches and doing everything they can, and our lawmakers that are standing in the gap. So I thank God for that. Is it good for the church? Well, my heart says no. My emotions say no. And no one wants to see that happen. But theologically, experientially, historically, I believe it's going to bring the cream to rise. It's going to bring the best out of us. It's going to cement our relationships and our faith. It's going to make us warriors. We're no longer going to be a multitude of sheep only, but we're going to rise up with the spirit of the Lion of Judah. And we're going to have to take off our play garments and put on our warfare garments. And we're going to have to pray like we've never prayed and get volatile. The Bible says the vehement, the fury of a prayer warrior, the violence of a prayer warrior, that one who will take it by force. That's the one that is moved and moves heaven. So we want to shake the heavens with prayer, interceding prayer. And the only way to do that is get disturbed enough to believe somebody's going to hell if you don't personally act.
Yeah.
And persecution brings that out of us.
Amen. All right, Pastor Hutchins, that brings our conversation to an end. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. Before you go, where can people find you, find your church, and watch either personally or watch online?
Well, they can find me on Facebook because I'm older, and and I have an Instagram page that I use rarely, but I'm there on Instagram as well. Wendell Hutchins, our Church of Champions, Houston. We are at 12922 Cutton Road in Northwest Houston, in the area called Champions, and that's why we're the Church of Champions. So we'd love to have everybody check us out on Facebook or on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Church of Champions. So check us out. We want to be a blessing to you, and we want to unite with you and pray with you for a citywide revival and a revival that will shake this nation.
Awesome. Yep. Well, beautiful. And yes, we'll all agree you have a beautiful smile. Have a great smile. So, Pastor Hutchins, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation, and I guess I will just chat with you later.
All right, man. Thank you. God bless.
Right.
It was an honor. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you missed most of it or some of it, you can go and check it out. Once I put it up on IGTV, it will be up and available probably within the next 15 minutes. Thank you so much for joining. Every Thursday night, I have a conversation with someone or, by myself, all about that bass. That's right. Or the bass, whatever. Next week, have a special guest, actually have Miss Arizona joining us. So that's going to be an exciting conversation, and I will chat with you later. And also, if you want to, if you haven't been listening to our weekly podcast, Alan and myself, the Sons of History podcast, you can find it on Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. I highly encourage you to check us out. A lot of really good conversations going on there. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for your comments, and I will chat with you later. Now, that was a really good conversation, even if I have to say so myself. Now, if you could do us a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you don't mind, like and comment on this video. While you're doing that, I'm going to wait for Thomas Jefferson to make his next move. You always win that staring contest. It's your move! Go! Okay. You seeing this? Are you watching this?